Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a financial show on Pod TV, Modern Investing. My name is Sasha Star, and my guests today are Dr. Milan Sambrak. Welcome to the show, Milan.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. It's great to have you. And Jim Eid from Eid Foundation. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, Sasha. I'm delighted to be anywhere.
Always my pleasure to have you. And today, market is not very kind to us, especially Nvidia dropped yesterday and today very substantial amount. And people who bought Nvidia at 740 on margin may have second thoughts about the wisdom of
Would
their
that
move.
include you, Sasha?
No, I'm not a buyer at 740, not at all. I have very protective positions. Everything is protected with enormous calls that I sold against my position. Of course, I'm losing on stock and even actually probably overall. But on average, I'll tell you that I sold. mm, okay, here we go. September 20th. 730 calls. I sold at $79. Sorry, it's now 79. Sorry, I sold it at 105 and a half. You understand what I'm telling you?
That's a profit for you.
105. So I have a room 730 minus 105. It's 625. So if stock Nvidia will go down to 625 or thereabouts, I'm breaking even because of the premiums that I was paid for these calls. So that's
I think I
basically.
misunderstood you.
Sorry.
I
So,
think I misunderstood you. I you're breaking even if it goes down that far.
Yeah, because I sold, I'll tell you, okay, exactly. Okay, September 30th, no, it's 20th. Sorry, September 20th calls this year, of course. I sold them at, on average, at 105 and a half dollars. So I collected premiums for one call only 105. You know, it's $10,500.
I'm with you now. Okay.
Okay. So what that means, so if there are 730 calls, okay, so if the stock will go down to from 730 to 625, I'm breaking even.
selling covered calls in a declining market or a lateral market does make sense. It works well.
Yeah,
Uh,
the problem only is that when you do that, you don't know you're dealing with declining market or a rising market. That's a big problem here. Because but my decision actually made sense. You see, basically, I was playing proposition that if Nvidia will continue to go higher, regardless how it's almost impossible to imagine, because if the stock was last week 740 plus, so if they have spectacular earnings season, the quarter, which is will be today after the market closed, so
Announced, yeah.
from 740 it has to jump to 790 or $800 a share. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but what I'm saying is that the even you know what, even valuation is not that impossible on Nvidia. It's less than 100 for a premier stock, which is basically, you may say, second to none. So the relation is not that impossible, but still, I believe that there are some other forces at play. I think that the people who bought it on margin at 740, these people had to be taken out. And I think that's what's happened yesterday. Nothing more, nothing less. Because the prospects of NVIDIA earnings, they didn't go down. There was no signal that, oh my God, something terrible happened and the earnings will be less than expected or so. Well, we will see it in about 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
was having this move before the earnings suggests something different. From my understanding, it suggests that the stock will go substantially higher on earnings report. If it's spectacular earnings report that you can fly to 775, maybe even 800. Now, if it's a good earnings report, slowly it will go back to 737. And if it's less than expected, then it will stay approximately where they are, maybe even go down. Maybe we'll see. It's very difficult.
Well, with NVIDIA, there's another factor that's going on. It's basically become the stock to buy in the arena of AI. And so it's sort of the bellwether for AI stocks. And there's the speculation is that are we nearing a AI bubble where people have invested so much in it and it's gone up so high that it's no longer sustainable. Now, there's a lot of that speculation that I've been looking at. I don't subscribe to it. I don't think we've hit a bubble. I don't see signs of a bubble. And I think NVIDIA's earnings report is going to meet expectations, and the expectations are high. They expect very good earnings. So one of the phenomena that we run into sometimes in investing is that good earnings, it could be that they expected higher earnings. And so even though you produce good earnings, your stock takes a hit. But there's also the idea that you're talking about is that the people are flushing out people that are buying margins called at 740, and they're preparing for an increase in NVIDIA. Now, my feeling, I have a fairly, for my standards, a fairly broad investment in AI in general, and all of the AI stocks have been getting hit a little bit starting last week and into this week. It's nothing like a crash. It's more like a kind of a correction, and that's the way I view it. Is we're seeing a little bit of a correction, but there's no basis because the earnings are still going to be very, very good.
James, could you comment on the fact that a paper was signed by 1,000 scientists, not people like you and me, Sasha, but scientists, stating that we should stop working on AI for the time being until we understand it better. Stop working on AI because of the potential risks. A paper signed by 1,000 scientists. Now, what are your comments on that?
Well, it's also true in the field of nanotechnology, which is making a lot of strides in medicine, and it's actually cross disciplines. And nanotechnology is being applied to all sorts of things. But nanotechnology is basically, like, nano means like 1/1000th of a meter, so a nanometer is incredibly small. So they're working at the atomic and more practically the molecular level. And you can't tell me that we understand it.
Yeah.
Yet we're creating products based on this. So the fact of the matter is that there is a fear factor. We're dealing with the unknown. Some of these nanotechnologies are producing nanofibers, for example, that are into, and used in coating, for example, in paint. And it's much better than the old ways of doing it. However, there are signs that it's also, if you're around it all the time, you can get mesothelioma. I think it's a type of cancer. It's like, breathing asbestos.
Mesothelioma.
Yes, thank you. It's that kind of danger that people are afraid of, and it's true of AI as well. We don't understand it well enough. We're advancing, as we usually do, beyond our level of understanding, because we produce products that work, even though we don't fully understand it, and we don't understand the ramifications. Yeah. So there is that fear factor, and it's justified. But I think, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. It's already advanced to the point where people can make profit off of it. Therefore, you can't go back. So the only thing you can do is go forward and put in place some sort of regulatory organization. And I know people don't like regulations, but it's the only way. And you can't rely on Congress, because these are usually people too old to understand this, such as myself. I don't pretend to understand all the implications of AI. However, there are people that are specialists in this field, and you can tap into them, form consortiums that can do a better job of judging what is dangerous and what is not dangerous, and then report to Congress and make recommendations. And are we doing that? Not as the speed that I would like. And I would like to see that in nanotechnology, in AI, and a lot of these types of things, these consortiums of scientists who are more aware of the realities than I am, or that we are, and have them be the safeguard for us. Put that in place. But there's no doubt in my mind that there are going to be negative implications. The negative implications will cause harm. After, first we have an advance, then we have harm, then we have litigation, and then we have regulation. So if we could break that cycle by putting in people who are knowledgeable, more in charge of what is safe and what is not, we could get ahead of the curve this time with things like AI and nanotechnology.
None of us like regulations, regulatory people now. When I was in dental practice and the regulatory people come in unannounced to check our emergency kit, to check what we do with the silver amalgam, which is 50% mercury, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I detested them because they could close you down if you had made some mistakes. But free market capitalism, the Adam Smith approach, has created more wealth than any other system, has listed more people out of poverty, but it does have its dark side. Like, for example, 12 different kind of cords, one for your smartphone, one for your iPhone, one for your this, one for your that. So imagine if you need a different kind of a plug for your toaster, and another one for your radio, and another one for your floor lamp, and another one for your desk lamp. That's what we have. And that's where regulatory issues come to make corrections. The regulators have now required the manufacturers of these different cords to reduce it to one. Yeah. Free market capitalism does have its
free market capitalism results in monopolies, and it stifles competition. Teddy Roosevelt over 100 years ago ran for president about busting the trust, which is their word at the time for monopolies. And because it was you cannot have free market capitalism without resulting in monopolies, stifling competition. It doesn't work. It has to be well-regulated free market capitalism.
Exactly, yeah.
And so as much as we don't like the word, it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. I'm surprised that this artificial intelligence being so popular, there is no single company that would be having the name of, say, Trump's artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Created, yeah. And well, he isn't artificial in which way. So if you would get artificial intelligence company,
you will have an artificial intelligence wife before he dies.
You may actually be trying to get that. I had a quick question. Actually, I had one for Milan and everything. But first off, there are all kinds of different chargers, because that frustrates me, because the charger for your phone isn't necessarily the charger for your computer. So that is something that is going on. And sometimes people want that
12 different charger. 12 different kinds. There were 12.
Yeah.
And my Tesla the charging for my Tesla is a different charger for other electronic vehicles.
No, definitely. There are different kinds of charges. And when you talk about regulations, I have some friends that are in the bar business and the restaurant business. And yes, they hate when the regulators come around, because oftentimes they are looking for those labels that are not marked. Because of those of you that are drinkers, and I'm not much of a drinker, but I know that some people that are listening know that there are those unmarked labels that sometimes bars will try to put, or they will try to switch labels. So they are not big fans when they see those people coming by. But my question for you, Milan, was, and I mentioned it to Sasha yesterday, was real estate is a big part of the S&P. And I know you're a big fan of the S&P, and there are some people that are concerned that the Trump decision, and even Kevin O'Leary, the so-called Mr. Wonderful, has said that there are markets that are going to be hurt by real estate. He was saying New York, and where Jimmy is, California, have already been hurt. And I didn't realize how much of an important sector real estate is in the S&P. So I just wondering your take on that, whether the real estate sector is going to be hurt by these decisions, because there's some people that are feeling that that decision that it was in New York is going to hurt the entire real estate market, and that certain states will be hurt and certain countries.
When you start cherry picking, you can do really very well in real estate. For example, in Canada, we have Toronto and Vancouver have done very well. But for every Toronto and Vancouver, we have a Windsor, which has done badly. We have a Sarnia, which has done badly. Same thing in the United States.
Absolutely.
In the United States, you know, that some communities in California have done very well. But for every one of those, there are communities which haven't done very well at all. So there is actually a fund which tracks real estate in 20 different cities in the United States. Case-Shiller Index. Shiller is a Nobel Prize-winning economist, and I don't know much about Case, but he's also an important economist. And they put together an index which tracks the prices of 20 cities in the United States. And when you take a look at the average of those prices, it's about 1/2 of the S&P 500. Yeah. So generally speaking, real estate is not as good an investment, particularly your home. You can't really think of your home as an investment because you have to live somewhere. So if it goes up in value, great. And if it doesn't go up in value, it shouldn't make much of a difference. You need to
live in it. Yeah.
But investing in real estate, say in condos and in different types of real estate units, it has been half as effective as investing in SPY. Although if you cherry pick, you can do well. Yeah. And you can do well primarily with hindsight.
And you can lose your shirt.
Yeah, you can lose your shirt and everything. But Jim, one of the things, and I'll turn it back over to Sasha, that he was saying and everything was that California and New York were going to be hurt by that decision. And he was urging people to go to Florida and, of all places, West Virginia and a number of other states that he felt were more approving of certain regulations and things along those lines. So he was thinking that real estate investors would have a better luck outside of New York and outside of California, but in some of these emerging markets, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Well, without these regulators coming in and looking at these places like where you eat food, you know, there would be more food poisoning than there is. So what we have to do is balance this, and we're not very good at doing this. And many of the regulations we have to suffer from not so much over-regulation as insane regulation. You know, the regulations that get put in place for a reason and don't get taken off the books. And then when we have technical advances, they come on and all of a sudden these regulations no longer apply, but they serve to slow down the process or stop it entirely. So what we really need to do is look at the regulations that exist. You know, part of Congress could have a committee that just says, look at old regulations and do we need them? Get rid of them, you know, this kind of thing. And we're not so good about deregulating. And the people that want to deregulate everything, which will put us back into the days before Teddy Roosevelt, which is not what we want either. We want intelligent regulation that changes over time. Yeah. As economy changes, the technology changes, the regulations have to change. And the problem is that we have doddering old men in Congress trying to regulate, and they don't know what they're doing. And they don't rely on expertise outside of it to inform them on what the regulations really should look like and what bills really should be passed. So, right, again, we go back to a do-nothing Congress that can't get anything done, that is just, you know, if you're for it, I'm against it, kind of stalemate. And these are the types of things that will cause chaos, and it's not good for anybody. But regulations are required. Otherwise, we suffer the consequences. We'd still be dumping toxins into the rivers, and the rivers would still catch fire. You know, I lived in the 1960s when these things actually happened. So, you know.
Here's a charming one. You know, regulations don't change very frequently and very often. Neither do laws. In Britain, it's all right to beat your wife as long as the stick that you use is not any thicker than your thumb. If you use a thicker stick, then you're breaking the law. But as long as the stick is thinner than your thumb, you can beat your wife with it. And that was put in place over 1,000 years ago, and it's still in place. It hasn't been eliminated.
It's not a very pleasant procedure for somebody's wife to be sleeping with a stick. Regardless how thin is the stick, it's not very pleasant, because if you remember,
whips aren't very thick.
I saw one documentary. I remember that I think it was American boy who put graffiti in Singapore, and he was
I,
confined to 9 hits by the stick. And they showed documentary how well they train these people in Singapore. So they are making 20 strides before hitting, and hardly anybody can withstand more than 5, 6 strikes and still being alive. Very, very difficult to imagine. So there was a petition and so on. So it was decreased to 4 strikes from 9. So I think he recovered after that. No more graffiti. He learned his lessons well, and life is back to normal, almost normal, I would say. Mark, when he asks that question about Mr. Wonderful about New York real estate, I think Mark meant something else. He meant that the Mr. Wonderful so upset about this ruling against Donald Trump of 365 millions plus interest, so it's 450 give or take, and another 88 million, close to 100, with interest coming from
yeah,
this other cases. So
start
we're
getting
talking
real
about
money.
$600 million, and he has to do this 27. So it's 26 days left until he has to post this money to appeal. Because he's not going to post this money to appeal, there is no more appeal available, and this $600 million will be extracted from him or his business one way or another through liquidating his real estate holdings or whatever. So 26 days. Well, we'll count these 26 days as they go along, and we'll see what he'll do. Now, Mr. Wonderful, you know, he's in there. He's too smart to be for Trump. He's trying to please not even Trump, because Trump is no entity anymore, but people who are voting for Trump, and this so-called the trust of people on the top Republican Party. Mr. Wonderful is smart enough not to upset them and say something to please them. So they say, oh, Mr. Wonderful, he is a great Republican guy.
Yeah.
He is fantastic. So that's a game he plays. I don't think that he's so stupid as to understand what's Trump doing.
But the argument is flawed, egregiously flawed, because if you're doing real estate the way Donald Trump was doing real estate, you should get fined, you should get in trouble, you should do time, in my opinion. But, most people in real estate, they may not be the most trustworthy people in the universe, but most of them are operating fairly and trying to make a profit, of course, but not indulging in fraud. And Donald Trump indulged in fraud. Now, it's not going to hurt New York City. It's not going to hurt California if you don't indulge in fraud. And if you do, you should be facing consequences. Donald Trump has avoided consequences by delay, and appeal. But the rooster is coming home to rest. And it's time for him to face the consequences, hopefully before the 2024 election. But, these things take the time. The judicial system is slow. But he's appealed, and lost. So there's a pattern that we can pay attention to here. He's losing. Remember when he said, well, you're going to get tired of winning? Well, isn't he going to get tired of losing at some point? Because he's lost all of his legal challenges. So, these are things to pay attention to when you're thinking of, hey, should we have a president that's convicted of fraud, convicted of defamation, and has been fined in these incredible amounts? Nobody else is doing business like Donald Trump, or at least his dad taught him how to do business this way. So it's not, he's not the only one doing business this way. But there's no harm in paying penalties, and it doesn't mean that everybody else is going to pay penalties.
This is unlike. this is unlikely to happen, but it is possible for Donald Trump to be the president of the United States and to be running the country out of jail. That unlikely, but it's possible. So, James, I want to ask you this. Donald Trump has offended all the women. There are not a lot of women voting for Donald Trump. He has offended people in the military, which are greatly respected, actually, in the United States. As you know, when people board an airplane, people in the military get to go on first. They're greatly respected. So he's offended them as well. How is it that when he has offended two major groups, that he still gets almost a half of the population voting for him? How does he get that kind of support?
So there are people that believe what he says. This is what a con man lives off of. You know, they con you because you believe them. And, you know, with someone like Donald Trump, you know they're lying when their lips are moving. So, you know, this is the kind of thing people have to pay attention to. But when you're conned, you don't want to admit you're conned. So you double down. And that's what we're seeing. And it's a roughly, you know, he's got a base of 1/3 of the country. You know, you can get it up to 40%, you know, 42%. You know, but I don't think it's half the country. I think when we go to the polls, because the Republicans have been on a losing streak, and the MAGA hat-wearing Republicans that bow to their knees to Donald Trump are losing more often than they're winning, over and over and over again. And I think we're going to see this in the 2024 election again. He's going to have his base. His base is never going to leave him. And they're still upset that they think that the 2020 election was stolen. You know, all the evidence is against them, but the evidence doesn't matter. Facts don't matter. It's their belief, their faith. That's and right. we have when you're talking about faith, there's no room for rational argument. So we can't change their minds.
I saw just a couple of days ago, just a very, very interesting program on CNN. I think it was headed by Anderson Cooper. And they analyzed all this situation happened prior to January 6th. And what was happening, if you remember, they went to court 60 times. They had lawyers and so on. 60 times it was rejected and so on. So the reason is, okay, so you're not that stupid if you went 5, 10 times to court and was thrown away. Why would you go 20 times, 30 times, 40, 50, 60 times with the same result? Apparently, there is a reason. Because they played this legal scenario that at the end of the day, they will be successful, so people would believe that they're successful. They prepared a like second set of electors in the states. And the reason that people agreed to serve as a fake electors was that they were bombarded that here are 60 lawsuits and we're going to win all of that and there will be a new slate of electors. So you have a chance to be elected. So this is the only reason why they were doing these lawsuits. Because I couldn't understand before why they were doing the same thing over and over. What is that? Oh, apparently there was a great mechanism of bringing these fake electors so they would believe. Because, you know, the selectors, nobody will really go to scrutinize what are these lawsuits, what is the evidence.
Right.
So, very few people will do.
There's 60 of them. Yeah.
And now all of them will be criminally charged, of course. Yeah. Some of them are already made deals and so on. And, of course, now it's a very interesting question, what's happened with this lawsuit in Georgia with Fani Willis. Because I've seen all the testimonies of yourself and all other people involved in it, your boyfriend, and all that stuff. She is a spectacular woman. I think she, regardless of this lawsuit, she has a great political future, of course, because she's already been on a map. She is a fearless fighter, and I think she appeals to a lot of people. And we'll see which way it will go. Generally, in my opinion, from what was played in front of judge, he doesn't have any real reason to remove her from the case.
I can't see any either.
There is no There is no legal reason now. So I think what will happen, he will leave, sure, but he may do a ruling which will, in some ways, jeopardize her in a quite substantial way. That although legally she is right, she didn't break the law. However, there is appearance of misconduct.
And ethics is an entirely different question than the law. So
Yeah.
you can have your complaints about that, but it doesn't mean that it affected the trials or affected the legal status in any case in any way. So
Absolutely.
it's more craziness on the Trump side. But we're facing this as a country, and what's going to happen to the economy? When Trump lost, and he did lose. The idea was that the stock market was going to crash. Well, the stock market has outperformed our expectations by a great deal, and the economy is doing extremely well. Most people are reporting that they think the economy is poor, but the fact is, you look at the numbers, the economy is doing great. Businesses are reporting record earnings. Everybody is making more money than, not everybody, of course, but people are making more money than they did. People are able to quit jobs because they are confident that they could find another one. This was not the case pre-COVID, but we did have inflation. It was caused by the global pandemic and the breakdown of the global distribution system. So this is still a problem because inflation is still high. So the cost of goods and services is still higher than it was 4 years ago.
But
So that's what people think about.
This show is called Modern Investing. And finally, we're talking about investing. We haven't talked about investing so far. We talked about Trump and so on. But really, finally, we're talking about investing. And it looks like interest rates have to come down.
Yes.
Which is a positive contribution. So now, real estate. If you invest in the broad American market, something that tracks the S&P 500, which reflects the American economy as a whole, there'll be real estate holdings in there as well. So
of course,
our group, Monday Morning Millionaire, they're a group of about 300 professional people who we discourage from owning individual stocks, and we encourage them to own the market as a whole. Because if you own individual stocks, you never know when you're going to own Enron, which is going to lie about their results. You never know where they're going to own Nortel or Pennsylvania Central Railroad, and the list is very long. And the first thing they start doing is they start twisting their financial statements. There is not a single entry in the financial statements that cannot legally be changed except the top line. And then they start lying about their top line. So individual stocks can hurt you. But the market as a whole, United States market as a whole, has been the leading market for over 100 years and very likely to continue being that way. Every dollar, every currency wants to be in the American dollar. And so owning the U.S. market as a whole is the safest way to go. There's no risk. The only risk is that the United States will collapse. Someday it will, but that day is not visible. Empires have a 100% failure rate, and the failure of the American empire is nowhere in sight yet, and probably unlikely to be in sight during our lifetimes.
And the correction is not a crash. You're going to have ups and downs in the market.
Ups and downs, absolutely. And that's why people should not have anything in the market that they're going to need in the next few weeks, months, a year or three. That money does not belong in the market, because the market, even though it's been the best performer for U.S. market, has been the best performer of any investment for over 100 years, does fluctuate as much as 30%. So that money, even though it'll be the best investment there is, will fluctuate, shouldn't be the money that you're going to need in the next year.
Milan and Sasha had a question, because actually it came up on the World Edition, and unfortunately Sasha was not able to make that this morning and everything. And I'm putting it in the chat. There was a merger that is going through, and I know some people are concerned because it involves the credit industry, but a lot of people, if you are aware two of the bigger credit unions are Discover and Capital, and all along those lines. And those two are merging, and some people are feeling that this merger could put a dent in the economy, particularly as a major monopoly in the credit space. So as most of all three of you are on the economic side, what is y'all's thoughts around this? Because when I saw that merger, I do know that a lot of people
Are we talking here about? Are we talking here about an initial public offering?
Mhm. It's my understanding is a full merger. It's a full merger.
Yeah. Merger of existing companies. Yeah.
Yes. Those always tend to do well in the short term. In the long term, meaning more than 3 years, almost all of them are down from where they were when they were launched. Yeah.
Well, we do have regulatory agencies that look at mergers and say, this will create a monopoly, and they
Right.
disapprove it. But if they pass those tests, flawed they may be, but there are those tests to pass, and the merger exists in the field that we're talking about. I don't see that producing a monopoly, and that's just my opinion. But I don't see any danger of that, because there's just so much competition in that area.
And also, don't forget that there are minor players compared to JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs and the other giants. They're like very insignificant players. So I don't understand why it's being talked about it so much. It affects very few people, actually, if you think about it. Those people who don't borrow the money, they don't care. Now, people who borrow the money, it's a very competitive industry. You're absolutely right. So if they will start jack up the interest rates that they will charge, they can always apply to another company.
They'll lose business. Yeah.
So to me, it's non-event, really.
Interestingly, there are some legal monopolies. And I'll give you an example. Singapore, by its location, is a legal monopoly. People have to stop, ships have to stop in Singapore to refuel, to restock, and so on. They have to stop in Singapore. It's just an ideal location. That's really a monopoly. It's a legal monopoly. We have one here. I live in a small town north of Toronto called Collingwood, and Collingwood is a ski town. And there are more people that can get to Collingwood in less than 3 hours than any other ski resort on the planet, which
Wow.
means it's a monopoly, really a legal monopoly. So, yeah, we can look for legal monopolies. There aren't many out there. Yeah, crime pays unless you get caught.
Jim, you mentioned electric vehicles earlier and everything. Is there ever going to be a electric vehicle version of, say, a Wawa or a Sheetz or something, where there's or even one of the other big gas stations where there's going to be like some firm that is controlling those electric vehicle charging stations? Because I don't know of anybody that's doing that right now, but I was wondering, do you think that that's ever going to take place, where there will be something like a Wawa or Sheetz or a BP or something like that that is kind of monopolizing or controlling that particular industry, since more people are getting electric cars?
Yeah, the infrastructure is not there yet.
No.
Once the infrastructure becomes, doable, so that people will buy electric vehicles, because it means they can still drive across the country. Once that happens, then you'll see people competing for those spaces.
If you take a look at the Tesla superchargers that exist today, and compared to what existed last year, compare that to where it's going to be next year. That's the planned ones.
Yeah.
Its infrastructure is developing. It may be not as quickly as we'd like to, but it is developing. And someday, all cars will be electric. In Norway, most people are driving Teslas. China has mandated that all vehicles be electric.
Yeah, they're beating us to the punch as far as electronic vehicles are concerned. Yes.
In China, they're still burning coal, and so that coal is not so clean. So even though the electric vehicle itself is clean, where is that electricity coming from? It's coming from burning coal in China. But they did create the Three Gorges Dam recently. They make decisions in China. I mentioned before, we have two things we can learn from the Chinese. One is they drink their soup. Soup is a lot easier to drink than to use a spoon. And two is that they need to qualify to ascend in government. So the higher up they go in the government, the higher the tests they had to pass. Whereas in Canada and the United States, you can have a crook like Donald Trump, the president, and you can have incompetent people, the type of democracy that we have. The founders of democracy say the ancient Greek Socrates, for example, would not be very happy to see the way democracy is run in North America today.
I agree.
And speaking about Chinese, don't forget that the chess world champion, both men and women, are Chinese. So they're very smart people indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for today's program. And we'll see you next Wednesday, although it will be one, but the following Wednesday, same place, same time. Have a very good trading, and in about 2 hours and a half, we are going to hear the
NVIDIA.
of NVIDIA. Good luck to you. Thank you very much. Gentlemen.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Enjoy Aruba.
Forward to next week. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
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 Okay, Ruben.